from the vault, high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Talking Catholic. I'm Jen Mauro, and with me is Mike Walsh.
All right, I really don't know where to begin. Because it feels like it's been a year and a half since the last time we recorded a podcast. I can't remember any of the preceding podcasts, but I am going to start off by thanking our listeners. And the reason I'm going to start off by thanking our listeners is that I had a myriad.
That's one of my favorite words.
Plethora, myriad.
The plethora.
Plethora, yeah. My mom as well. A plethora of listeners come up to me, not from South Jersey, and let me know how much they like the podcast. I also had a bunch from South Jersey show up, but what really impressed me was how many didn't come from South Jersey. I got pulled to the side a couple of times at the New Jersey March for Life. Bishop Sullivan had a 20th anniversary event last weekend, and one of the people there pulled me aside and said, not only that, I mean, she came up to me and I knew this happened to other real celebrities, but she came up and talked to me like she knew me. So she was excited to see me and like, hey, how you doing? I'm like, how are you? And I'm just assuming because I don't remember anybody. It was somebody I knew and had forgotten. She's like, oh no, you don't know me. I'm a podcast listener. Oh. I was like, oh my God, really? This is awesome. And she went on and on to extol. By the way, not only how much she enjoys the podcast, right? And you're gonna hate this part. Thinks I'm funny.
Oh my. I don't know who you are, ma'am, but I invite you to come to the office and spend one day with Mike Walsh.
She was an absolute delight. My wife was next to me when she came in, so I introduced her to my wife, and my wife was also shocked.
I was going to say, what was her reaction?
Her reaction was incredulousness.
Do you know him?
Yeah, exactly. But everybody who listens to the podcast, we've had a very busy, very public last couple of weeks in the Diocese of Camden with our new coadjutor Bishop Williams. Then the next week we celebrated Bishop Sullivan's 20th anniversary. And then we had this other major New Jersey event, the March for Life, this past Thursday. It was just great having everybody come up and say hi. So this has been lovely. To our listeners, you're always welcome to come up and say hi. You'll get a much better reaction if you come up and say hi to Jen or Carrie or Mike or Marianella. But it's lovely when you came up and say hi to me too. So thank you, everybody. You guys genuinely made my week. Sometimes I forget that people actually listen to this stuff.
That we don't just do it for fun.
Because I would do it just to amuse myself.
It's not just for witty banter. People are actually listening. That is so great to hear.
It was really nice.
It's like probably as soon as you start talking, they recognize your voice because you have a very distinct voice. I think they probably are like, "Hey, we know that guy."
This person came up and saw me. Like I hadn't spoken yet.
Oh, okay.
So it's just there must be some visual out there.
Somewhere out there, your face is floating around.
Yeah, exactly. It was really nice. But anyway, yeah, it was great.
That's awesome. Well, you mentioned 3 big events that we have had since the last time that we did a podcast together.
Yeah, you and I haven't recorded. Last time we recorded was the Bishop Sullivan episode, right, which we have also gotten a ton of positive feedback on.
So much good feedback.
That has been really nice. I mean, I know we joked for a long time that I was not having him on, never going to have him on and stuff like that. And just to be silly, we always wanted him on. But the truth of the matter was, I needed a good reason. He's out in the public all the time. He doesn't need to come on our pokey little podcast here. But with his 20th anniversary, I was like, that's actually a good reason to have him on. It's a useful reason. And man, he knocked it out of the park. I've had more people come up and tell me that they actually finished that podcast kind of teary-eyed. And it was really nice.
And I think that's, first off, I think a lot of the podcast of him was speaking about how pastoral he is in his pastoral days in New York. And then also, we ended it with him singing a recording of a song that I believe you took at the massive welcome for Bishop Williams.
Yeah, in the after dinner party. And it was, that was great. I'm so happy I recorded that because a lot of people have also mentioned that as well. But so our very, very busy couple of weeks, the welcome, the massive welcome, and the Vespers for Bishop Williams. He could not have been kinder to us, and his family could not have been kinder to us for all of the sort of publicity around it all. The Catholic Star-Herald has been getting an enormous amount of love these past 3 weeks about the 2 special editions we put out back to back. I'm still not entirely certain how your staff pulled that all together, and yourself, I might add. I know for a fact that there were a few sleepless nights in there.
Just a few.
Yes,
For the staff as well.
Yeah, exactly. But to be able to turn around a 76-page paper and a 60-page paper with our very hardworking but not overly large staff was truly epic.
Thank you.
Well done.
Well, we loved it. We loved doing it. I'll be honest. The stories were so fun to tell. Getting to know Bishop Williams's family and friends from Minnesota. And also, we had some of our freelance partners, so we couldn't have done it without them. And I did hear from a few readers as well. They said that they felt that the issue, especially the Bishop Williams, since we're talking about that one first, was like they could actually feel love in the pages. Like they could feel that friendship and warmth coming out of the pages from those who had spoken from Minnesota. So, but yeah, the staff they've been working pretty hard, and I'm proud of them.
They have. And I'm happy to say that I will also report that they've each sort of tried to take a day or two here to sort of recover from all of that. However, we have a lot more editions to go. I don't think we are, for those who don't know, the Catholic Star Herald is semi-weekly. We publish 36 weeks a year, and we don't get another week off until middle of October.
Yeah, middle to end of October. So we're going with 7 or 8 straight weeks. Yeah. Or episodes. Yeah, we can call them episodes right, too. They feel like that. But the mass for the massive welcome for Bishop Williams, for anybody who didn't see it, it was live streamed, and you can go back and watch it on all diocesan platforms. But it was packed. It was so amazing to see so many people welcome him, and then afterward he took so much time to meet everybody one-on-one.
He really did. And he's continuing that process for the next 5 weeks. He started this past Wednesday. He's going to be going out to, for the next 5 Wednesdays, going out to all of the deaneries, the 5 deaneries in the diocese. I was at the one for Deanery 1 on Wednesday. It was great. Once again, not quite standing room only. It was in a big church, but I would say it was about 2/3 filled.
Wow.
And the dessert reception afterwards, I actually kind of felt bad for him because the desserts were delicious, but he didn't taste a morsel of it because he made it about 10 feet into the reception, and a line formed I was there for an hour. I was there. He left later than me. He had that line for an entire hour with just one person after another, or a group of people after another, for one straight hour. Just wanted to come up, say hi. Some people asked for a blessing from him and stuff like that. It was really nice to see.
It's interesting you say that, because I saw that also after the massive welcome, and there was the dinner for Bishop Williams, and he was out front greeting everybody, to the fact that somebody actually brought him a little plate of food so he could snack really quick and then just go back to meeting people. And I would think that he snacked for like 30 seconds. It was not long. Then He's going to lose a lot of weight here, I think, by until everybody's used to him.
That would be a first for bishops. Usually, once you become a bishop, no one gets skinny being a bishop. But he is a very athletic type, so I'm hoping he'll be able to hold it off for a wee bit.
Right.
But the following week was Bishop Sullivan's 20th anniversary. Now, we certainly talked to him for an entire hour, so I won't go over too much. But it was a lovely, he had his anniversary mass at one of the local parishes at Christ Our Light, and he didn't want to do anything big for it. He just wanted to have mass in a parish, and that's what he did. And there were some invited guests from New York, and his family came down for it. And then there was a small dinner afterwards, which I was honored to be invited to. And it was just kind of a small affair, and it was just I don't find, he's not the type that gets overly sentimental, but I think he truly appreciated being around the parishioners and then being with his friends and family to celebrate his 20th. Friends, family, and me. I don't know where I fall in that category, but it was. I did have to ask around. I was like, I don't know how I got invited to this, but yeah, I think they wanted me to work it. I think that was what my mistake was, and I just sat down and ate instead.
No photos?
No, there were no photos. I took photos at the mass, but no photos at the dinner. Because it was private. Yeah. And then, but then the other thing is, and I want to just touch on this a little bit. I know you went on it, some might say ad nauseum, on your pokey secondary other podcast.
2 pokies in one podcast?
Yeah, well, they're both pokey, but the other one, I usually refuse to listen. What's your other podcast called?
Better Together. It's a radio show from Domestic Church Media.
Every time I hear it.
Oh, hush you. And anyway, so my co-host and I, Emily Italia from the Diocese of Trenton, interviewed James King, the executive director of the New Jersey Catholic Conference. So.
So that if you're listening on DCM, I think that one comes out after this episode.
If you're listening on Sunday, I think they're back to back. You're getting 2 hours of Jen Mauro today, everybody. Wow. I apologize.
That sounds like a lot.
It's way too much.
Yeah, to our DCM listeners, it's not I didn't ask her to go on it. Trust me, I get it.
I think I actually apologized on the Better Together show too.
It's for the best. Anywho, but we did go to the New Jersey Mass for Life and Rally for Life up in Trenton this past Thursday. Great turnout.
Unbelievable.
Another standing room only event. And then
1,200 people, they're saying.
Yeah, and then to see that 4 of the 5 bishops of New Jersey was there. One of them was in Rome, so Bishop Cecchio couldn't be there. But a great outpouring. A ton of our Catholic school students were there. A whole bunch of folks from the Camden Diocese, but people from all over the place. Cardinal Tobin celebrated it, but mostly I was just very impressed. Events like that, you want to see a large group of people, and that was a large group of dedicated people.
And then
on a rainy day too.
Exactly. The Trenton Cathedral fits about many hundred, and then underneath there's even more room where they were live streaming it, and it was live streamed in English and Spanish. So they also had headsets. So if you were in the and you didn't understand they had
what that table was.
Yep, they had headsets for Spanish, and somebody was translating.
Nice.
So yeah. But it was a bilingual mass, and then afterward, hundreds of people walked to the State House Annex for some talks and some March for Life witness. So it was a beautiful. You know what I loved about it the most is all of the dioceses coming together. All 5 dioceses from across Catholic dioceses from across the state coming together. I
would like more reasons to have statewide Catholic events. We used to have them back in the day, and they kind of dropped off post-COVID. I would like to see things like that, including ones that maybe aren't related to things. Just in general, I would like to see more statewide Catholicism. I
would also like to say that I don't like the word diocese. It's too hard. Can we just switch it to diocese? Diocese. Yeah, I like it. I'd like to make a public announcement that that's what we're going to call it from now on. I can't say it. I can't say Mike is just silent.
I just want to make sure there's a big enough break so everybody could realize what you just said. And then let it sit there for a little bit.
I think they're going to be supporting of it.
Yeah, good luck with that. So we have a lovely set of interviewees with us today. One that actually we were at a presentation they gave earlier. This has been a very busy week. I've been all over creation. But they had a really great event focused on new thoughts about how to, I'm not going to describe it for them. I'm going to allow them to describe it. But it has a lot to do with, not going to describe it at all. I'm just going to bring on our guest.
What? Catechetical accompaniment.
Yeah, I get that.
Okay.
But that's not going to be descriptive enough, so I'm going to let them talk.
All right.
So we have... Wait, why am I introducing
I don't know, but I have them. Do you want to read it?
No, go ahead. Do it yourself.
Even though I know them, and I've known them for years, I still have to pronounce it. So with us, we have Dr. Lee DelleMonache. She is the Director of Religious Education for the Diocese. Welcome, Lee.
Well, thank you. And thank you for pronouncing my name correctly.
I've been practicing. And Dr. Bill Watson, who's the Superintendent of Catholic Schools for the Diocese. Hi, Bill.
Hello, Jen.
Bill deserves a lot of credit. He literally raced into the recording studio because he was out and about today. So thank you for jetting up there.
I think I've caught my breath, so I hope.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I'm not breathing too quickly on into the microphone. So
it's all right.
I'm sure you'll edit it out.
Exactly.
No, he won't. Actually.
No, I won't.
He won't. He doesn't edit anything out.
And every time I say I'll edit, I'm like, yeah, sure. No, I never do. So you guys had a great event on Wednesday, one that we really enjoyed coming to, not for the least of which because it was great fellowship too, but you pulled together basically catechists from around the diocese and had a great conversation with them. This is sort of like the middle part of this process for you. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about what this process is and what the thought behind it is.
Well, not so long time ago in a galaxy not so far away, I started with the diocese a little over 2 years ago, and very quickly in my first year, in meeting a lot of different PCLs, the directors of religious education at all of the parishes, and with pastors and with diocesan leadership, it became crystal clear there was a lot of challenges that they were facing and some needs and hopes that they were hoping that we could achieve together. So after all of that due diligence, and I'll spare all the details, but after all of that the recommendation came from the bishop to launch a task force to look at the preparation and celebration of the sacraments of First Reconciliation, First Communion, and Confirmation. So in looking at that, we put together a task force, 10 PCLs, parish catechetical leaders from across the diocese, 2 from each deanery. And then we also had a couple of pastors, some folks representing schools, and folks from the diocese. So there were 17 total. And when we started looking at it, we looked at families come to their parish for sacraments for their children. And they're coming to us voluntarily. Nobody's bringing them, forcing them to come in. They're coming in voluntarily. So we looked at, well, why? Why are they coming? What are they coming for? What do they hope to achieve? What gets in the way of them achieving those goals? So we really unpacked that. And through that process, a lot of great ideas and recommendations came up. But the ultimate one, gradually we came to the conclusion that this goes beyond the preparation for these and celebration for these 3 sacraments. This touches on all of formation. Wherever the parish touches in terms of catechesis, in terms of formation of the people that we serve, we need to go there. It's almost like, when you look at medicine, trying to help someone, instead of treating the symptom, you need to go to the root cause. So the task force came to the conclusion is we need to get to the beginning of this process and move away from the consumer type process that we're in now, the industrial type process, assembly line, and get into formation and meeting people where they are, being more accompanying, being more pastoral first, and then getting into the catechesis and ultimately to the celebration of the sacrament. So I'd love to unpack whatever you want of all that with you, but I'll let you guys tell us.
I kind of wanted, you touched on a great word that I remember from y'all, because Bill, you spoke as well. You both spoke on the evening of, I think it was the 24th.
Tuesday, 24th, yeah.
First off, you said you didn't want to get into the details, and I totally get that, the nitty gritty. But I do want to say I was very moved by the fact that there were over 50 people there, right? Like so many parish catechetical leaders were there, which is a true testament to you going out to every parish and meeting people one-on-one. And I think that, we're talking about evangelization. That's where it starts, right? You're literally walking in the door. So to get everybody to that point was you saying, okay, or the team saying this needs to happen, right? So I just want to give a shout out to that because that was beautiful to witness.
And I think it shows the hunger that they have as leaders at their parishes. They recognize they can't keep doing what we're doing. The model just doesn't work anymore. It certainly had its heyday, and it's not to say the past. It did work at some point,
right.
But the world has changed, and the demands of the culture have changed, and the challenges that we're facing have changed. And because of all that, parish leaders recognize that. Right. They know it. They can say it. But they need equipment, right? They need the resources. They need to be equipped in order to do it. So they are hungry for it.
Which is what you gave them. And I don't want to
interrupt.
Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to jump
in.
in.
Bill, the true teacher, raised his hand. And I am so proud of him for that. Go ahead.
I don't want to disrupt the flow. I want to say, well, if it's okay for me here. Yeah. The true teacher, but also the true learner. Always a student.
Always a student.
No, but at least talks about, the model, right? So I think it's important to just kind of take a step back and say what we're talking about here is what I think a lot of listeners would remember as CCD or, like class style models. And as Lee mentioned, that was, when we had a church where there was a lot of synergy between what happened in the parish and what happened in the home, and in many cases what happened in a Catholic school. You had a lot of synergy where the parishes were the center for more people of a fuller experience of the faith. And we know that isn't the case for as many people today. We certainly know that the parish is still the center of the faith for many, many people, But I think, and Lee mentioned sort of the industrial kind of component. Over time, I think inadvertently and certainly not to anyone's fault, I think what happened is we ended up having these kind of, experiencing the sacraments as endpoints. I did it. I got my first communion. I did it. I made my first, reconciliation or confirmation. But as Catholics, we know that the sacraments are not endpoints. They are, central to our experience of Christ in our faith and in the world. So they're launching off points. And so I think that kind of a thought process, and that's one of the things that really struck me in the conversations as part of the task force, was the recognition on every person there, as Lee said, sort of knowing that something, needs to be different. And I think that thing was kind of that thing that needed to be different was they have an instinct. We all, I think as Catholics have an instinct towards like this full life in the sacraments, and we want to invite people deeper and deeper into it. And because the world has changed, the tools that we're using for that are not always the best fit. They're still a good fit for many people, but for a lot of people, they're a less good fit for more and more people than, or at least more people than they used to be. And that's a result of a lot of things. But that instinct towards wanting to draw people deeper into the sacraments, to Lee's point, really means wanting to draw them deeper into the life of the church, wanting to give them more opportunity, wanting to satisfy the hunger that people are coming to the church for. So I just want that to me, that really struck me. That as a group, it was really a deep recognition of, like as Lee said, we're really talking about the life of the church and a sacramental life.
I'll be honest. There was one moment because what's her name, Jen, mentioned also being moved by something. I'm sort of a body emotion tends to stay emotion kind of guy. I'm not always looking for a lot of divergent. And so when I knew this was coming down, I was curious to see what your results were going to have been. But, sometimes it takes me a long time to, agree with a new idea. And then I guess it was you, Lee. You were the one who used the word industrial, I think. And that, I swear, it was like getting punched in the face. I was like, that is exactly what we've been doing. It has been an assembly line of putting together these Catholic pieces and then pushing them out the door, thinking that that's the end result. And I hadn't thought of it so coldly before, and it completely changed my entire perspective in that use of that one word. So thank you for being so accurately descriptive in what we were doing, and this now going down this more holistic approach. I'm just trying to use as many words as I can right now because I see Jen getting irritated.
Who wants to talk?
No, because this is what I want to say. I want to say the flip side of that, because you talked about the industrial side, and then you said getting out of the industrial and going into the agricultural side.
Yep,
and that's what I thought was beautiful, because you brought two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. We're not. I think we're not producing children who can receive the sacrament, right? We're sort of nurturing the desire and the life of the sacrament in the children. And their families, for that matter. I mean, that's a really big component of it. And we do that for each other, right? We sort of lead each other closer and closer to Christ, and that the agriculture takes more time, right? And it isn't.
You don't always see the fruits of your work,
and you don't. Right. Yes, you don't always see the fruits of the work, but I think it's a more appropriate sort of thought.
There's two things I wanted to kind of lay some context around that whole concept. One of the first people that I met in my one-on-one meetings was Lori Power, who I know is a great contributor to our Diocese of Camden podcast. Lori said to me, and she's DRE, she said to me, Lee, I'm tired of an assembly line. Of an assembly line of people coming through. An assembly line of sacraments. I want to be producing soul. I want people to go to heaven. I don't want people just receiving their sacraments. So that started that whole concept. When Bill and I had the immense privilege to go to the Institute on the Catechism Convocation this past June, which was sponsored by the USCCB. Bishop Sullivan was invited, and he asked us to go. Well, it was an amazing experience. And one of the things that Bishop Caggiano, who is the bishop who oversees the Institute on the Catechism, had spoken about the importance of this evangelizing catechesis, this catechetical accompaniment, and the importance of encounter. And we can get into all that in a few minutes. But what he spoke about is our shift away from this consumer model of just sacrament prep, and more. He said the adults, we have to think of the adults as the primary audience, not the children. If the adults are formed with the faith, and they then go out on mission, then that eliminates this whole consumer model. Mm-hmm. So that was I think that was another paradigm shift for us in that. All right, because we're always thinking of we're the Secretariat for Catholic Education, so we our primary are the little faces in front of us. But really, when you look at it, it's the families. We could do amazing work with those children, but if they go home and if that's not nurtured, then it stops. And then it stops, and we can't let that continue to happen. So this model, this culture of encounter that we're taking steps now to build, I think is really going to have tremendous impact on the church as a whole.
And to your point, Lee, about that being synergistic with other things happening. I mean, I think of the work in Donna Ottavino's ministry, in parishes and forming intentional disciples, and just the. Bishop Sullivan said at the end in his remarks at the event that we're talking about here that this is a great example of a synodal church, listening and responding and accompanying and walking together. So what excites me, one of the things that excites me is all of these ministries kind of working together and, again, towards the mission of the church. And we all have a role to play in that mission, but the mission of the church is the mission of the church. Jesus said, go and form disciples. Okay, well, that's what we're trying to do here. And at the end of the day, that's what we're about. And I think it's really cool that there's so many avenues to doing that.
Yeah.
Nope. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to dovetail on that. It's to listen to this reminded me of conversations that Bill and I have had related to Catholic schools over the years and the importance of getting parents to understand, as well as getting teachers to understand the nature of the faith and, the sadness that comes from people like, particularly, and I'm saying Bill and I because he and I have had these conversations, that drop off of Catholic school kids from 8th grade to 9th grade and how many of them, for a variety of reasons, legitimate reasons, end up going to like public schools or something like that, and then they slowly sort of wane out of a lot of these Catholic programs. I love that this is taking a completely different approach to it, where there will be reasons to have these kids these families, because we talk about the parents all the time about how so much of the successes can be found in what kind of parents we're dealing with. I'm not suggesting that one kind of parenting is better than the other, but the parents who are involved tend to be the ones who have kids that are also involved. I'm not saying it has to be done in a psychotic manner. Just all right, maybe that was the wrong word. But if it's a part of your core existence, if it's a part I don't necessarily have my Catholic faith. Well, this is going to be weird to say. Because I work for the diocese. I don't necessarily have my Catholic faith dripping off of me, but my son has never questioned for a second that we are Catholic and that we go to church. Matter of fact, in the last 2 weeks, he went to church by himself because we went to other masses that we were invited to, Bishop Sullivan's. Right. And the next day he had to go by himself, but he didn't question it. He didn't question it because that's what we do. That's what you do. And so it's become center to his life, and I'm very proud of him about that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
And that one of the things we were actually just this morning. Lee led the Catholic school principals through a reflection on part of the Nicene Creed, led by, it was a video from Bishop Barron, and I'm trying to recapture the. Sorry, I lost the thought.
That's okay.
I'll come back.
Try
that hasn't happened to me on a podcast before.
That's okay.
I'll bring it back.
Listen, it's hard to distill Bishop Barron. I mean, that is a prolific speaker.
And let me tell you,
right
and that series is thank God they do it in small chunks, because he's so beautifully brilliant and how he explains things and he breaks it down. But you really need to sit in it and spend some time with it. But Mike, to point about what you were saying, there's research that backs up, I think, what you were trying to say.
The psychotic part?
The not the psychotic part,
after.
but about adolescence.
About
There's
that.
recent research came out from Springtide on 13-year-olds, and those that were engaged with religion and had some type of religious or spiritual life, an intentional spiritual life, reported less incidents of loneliness and depression. So you start there. Talk about root causes.
Yeah.
You know, that means it's not turning into other horrible things down the road. So there's just, when you involve the family and whatever that looks like
Right.
in the entire process, then it just becomes natural. It's like, your son doesn't question it. It's just what we do.
Oh, yeah.
So Lee's mentioning that, jogged my memory, and I wrote it down so I don't forget it again. I'm sort of embarrassed by that.
No.
He's human.
one of the
You're
things-
psychotic. You're fine.
That's true. I'm off the hook.
Sometimes
Really,
it's
if
better
anybody gets the
I know. Oftentimes it's important more what you didn't say than what you did
Yeah,
say.
right.
But hey, listen, just for anyone who's wondering, we're recording this at 2:00 on the Friday afternoon. All of
After a
our
very
brains
long week.
may be a little spent, so who knows what's going to come out.
So this, dovetailing off that, Bishop Barron spoke about, like God is not one aspect of our lives. He didn't say this, but I interpreted that to mean you don't have, school and your sports team and your family or whatever. It's not one aspect. He supersedes and surrounds all of that, right? And is our relationship with God frames everything else. It's not just one thing that we do. And I think that's really, really important, back to that spiritual connection. Once you have you experience the sacraments, you continue to experience the sacraments, you're a regular participant in Mass, you're part of the parish, you're sort of, you begin to get that a little bit more, and God becomes the framework, and that relationship is your primary relationship in life, so that everything else kind of falls into that. And that's this huge opportunity that we have to help, because what happens is that, to your point, Mike, you have kids who leave a Catholic school, and make no mistake, by the way, we have the reality in a religious education program in a Catholic school is similar. You have families who are sort of all in, and the parents are in, and and accompanying their kids and so forth in a Catholic school or a religious education program. And in both places, you don't, right? There are some families that are less committed that way. But what you do have, where you do have kids who maybe leave a Catholic school and don't go to a Catholic high school, whether they're in a Catholic school or a religious education program, after confirmation, you see a huge drop-off in their participation in Mass, in their presence in the parish. And part of that is, I think we have a responsibility to build enough of a community and a support system around them that they're not only going to their school for their faith formation, for their sort of, when they're hungry for God, they don't just get it at school. When they're hungry for God, they don't just get it at the parish events surrounded towards they're receiving the sacrament of confirmation. They get it in lots of different places. They have a hunger for it, and they build a sort of a habit and a lifestyle. And we're not there for most kids. Or let me put it this way: I mean, there's a lot of kids who are there, and that's because they have good support systems. Right. But our obligation, I think, is to build systems so that everybody gets there.
I think that's one of the points that also comes across, like in even just in the meeting y'all had the other day. But and you've already mentioned it. It was you, Lee, Bill, and Donna Ottaviano Britt. You have evangelization, Catholic schools, and director of religious education. Right there, you're showing that these are not three entities that are operating separate. You're coming together to work together because it's a lifelong process. What did you say? There's not endpoints, but also, if they're not being met at school, they're met at the parishes. And with Donna's group, the evangelization, maybe that's more for the adults. It's a team effort.
Absolutely, and we were very intentional about that. This model will not work if there's not an integrated approach to this. It has to come from all. It has to come from life and justice. It has to come from youth and young adult. It has to come from religious education. It has to come from schools. It has to come from all the areas, or else it's not going to work. And
can you diving in a little bit more of that? So let's get into a little bit more of those details. Like, what can people expect, or what were you talking to these PCLs about?
Well, I think it's a good place to start is at the end. And at the end, the metaphor that I used when I invited the PCLs to allow the Holy Spirit to work with them and to enlighten them and to be open to the Holy Spirit through the lens of the story of Emmaus. And when you look at the story of Emmaus, you look at what, Cleopas is walking away from Jerusalem, and Father Mike says Mrs. Cleopas, but walking away, Christ was just crucified. They're walking away. They're distraught. This whole movement that they believed in is gone. But what happens is this mysterious stranger comes and accompanies them, and is very pastoral at first, and walks with them. Well, what happened? Are you okay? What's going on? Why do you feel? And then it was after that. Then this mysterious stranger says, "Well, remember what the prophet said. The prophet said these certain things were going to happen." And then they had a meal. And in the breaking of the bread, Cleopas realizes it's Christ. Jesus is there. And it took the sacrament in order for that recognition to happen. But they needed to be accompanied first. They needed that pastoral experience. And then they needed the catechesis. So my call to them was, we've been so hyper-focused on the catechetical part that we lost sight of the importance of the pastoral part. So let's first look at what are the needs. Every parish has a very different community and culture and unique community culture, and we need to honor and respect that. So when you look at your parish community and culture, where are they at? Where can we walk with them? Is it needs for daycare? Is it tutoring? Is it English as a second language? Is it food insecurity? Is it whatever it is? It addiction? Is it whatever the needs might be? And then, okay, as a parish leadership team, what do we have? Where's our areas of expertise that we can then offer? And then those are that's where we meet them where they are, and then that creates opportunities for catechesis. And then we get them to the sacrament. So I think what blew the minds off, the roof off, it was the realization. It's something I think people suspected, but then the fact that I articulated it, they're like, okay, we're really serious about this. One of the biggest limiting factors that our DREs were feeling in sacrament preparation was this school-like model, 2-year prep rule. There was this, and understandably so, because it was a model that worked. There was a standard of preparation that a child had to be in religious education for 2 years before they could receive a sacrament. This concept blows that up and says, we're not going to confer sacraments at level completion, but what we want to work towards is conferring sacraments at readiness. Well, that means, who determines readiness, and what does readiness look like? So there's still a lot of work left to do. But if we're working towards readiness, it doesn't just end at the sacrament. So that was the whole, I think that's the, I think my fear was people were going to be like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? This isn't how we do. But everyone was lovely. I think we purposefully took them on the journey of this, and I credit to the Sacrament Task Force for this, because they were the leaders in all this. They were the ones who painstakingly went through this entire process and started thinking, okay, we're updating standards. What are best practices? And came to the realization, no, we got to look bigger and broader than all this. And they realize that if the Eucharist is the central of everything, then we've got to break away from this 2-year rigid school-like model. And we've got to get more, because each family, each child is going to get there at their own pace, at a different way. But we have to make sure that we're supporting them on that way.
And to use that agricultural model, or that analogy, right? We know that a plant needs sunlight, most plants, almost all, but sunlight, water, and good soil. And in some cases, there may be a drought, right? So we don't know how much water a particular seed has gotten, right? Or it's maybe too much rain or too little, or maybe that seed doesn't need as much. That plant doesn't need as much rain. So to sort of set those same expectations, at the same timeline, I should say, on the faith development. I mean, you could put a timeline on, and we do it all the time, on certain concepts, things you ought to know, kind of a thing. But in terms of the sort of the interior life, if you will, it's hard to put a timeline on that, and so there's a real recognition that while there are some things that you can put that are a little more concrete, we have to kind of start diving into the things that are less concrete. Maybe be comfortable with some uncertainty, and that's the church needs to be comfortable with that uncertainty, but so does a family. In the authentically seeking, the sacraments for their kids, or even just the development of their kids, the religious education, the faith formation of their children.
So one of the things that you were talking about with the task force and some of these ideas that had come out of it was that we're not going to stop doing the thing the way we used to do it. It's slow.
Right.
It's not like everything's going to be turned upside down overnight.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh my gosh, no, I would never. I could have sat in my office for a week and came up with what this whole thing's going to look like and said, okay, everybody, this is what you're supposed to do. No. What we're going to do is keep doing what they're doing, but as they're doing that, to look at the characteristics that the task force recommended as to this is what's elemental to all of formation. Anything that a parish ministry would offer, it should connect to these characteristics. So as you are doing what you're doing, look at and then maybe as you're going through that and you have this awareness of these characteristics, what modifications can be made. So we're going to slowly walk with all of our parishes as they do that, continue to provide resources and opportunities to gather, to reflect on the experiences that they're having. And, eventually we'll kind of offset the old way of doing things, and all of a sudden, before you realize it, there'll be a newer way of doing things. There's one of our pastors at Father March down at St. Vincent de Paul. He has this beautiful. In fact, he brought this to my attention. It's one of the resources that we're going to be offering. It's called Pathways, and it blows up that whole model that we talked about that is the outdated way of doing things, and takes and works with the family. And at the center of it, which is the central characteristic of the recommendations that the task force made, is that every formative effort establishes and values the centrality of the Eucharist. Well, one of the main ways of doing that is regular Mass attendance. So the pathways says that's the first thing that he asks of his families. If they want to use this model of formation, regular Mass attendance is critical to this. And then from that, all these other wonderful formative experiences happen. But I love that it put that at the center. And in such a short time, he's seen tremendous impact of that. And Mass attendance has gone up. Families are more engaged with the parish. They're attending other events. So there's something to be said about coming to Mass every week.
Right.
It's true.
And to his credit, so just to, Father March takes the time to meet with families. And the Pathways is, it's for families to learn the faith together. So for parents to support their kids in the growth of their, understanding of the faith. And they do it at home. But they have to have that invitation to do it. And they have to have, in this case, the conversation with the pastor who makes that investment. But as Lee said, then the return on that investment is that more people are participating in Mass, and the return is for them, right? That he makes the investment so that then they invest, and their returns are tremendous. So,
well, that one of the things that Bishop Caggiano said at the convocation in June was that this requires a holy boldness, and that's what making that invitation and calling on inviting them to this to keep. We never really fully achieve the bar, right? We reach the bar. It's constantly being raised, and we constantly need to be striving for it. But that's what formation is. Yeah. That's exactly what formation is. It's not a checklist. Okay, I'm done. I did my 2 weeks this summer, and I'm done. Right. It is not that. It is a constant, evolving, formative experience that requires constant engagement. It requires that constant sunlight and watering, and that never ends. And in order to get there, we have to be bold. Pastors have to stand up in front of their folks and say, we have to move away from, come when you can, and to I expect to see you here. How can any relationship grow if you're not physically present to it?
Right. If
we want to have a relationship with Christ, you need to be physically present to Christ.
So you mentioned the pastors, and you brought up Father March. Where were the pastors in this process? Were they also brought into this process?
They were brought into this in a number of different ways. First, it was in the Presbyteral Council, so the pastor leadership. They were the ones who requested this examination of the preparation and celebration of the sacraments. So it started with them. And so much back and forth. I think I've met with them 4 or 5 times throughout the last 2 years. Where we're at, they give me feedback, I bring it back. On the task force, we had a number of pastors on the task force. And we also, in addition to some family feedback gathering that were conducted, we also had a pastor focus group as to tackle that question of readiness. What does readiness look like? Describe to me what are the characteristics that readiness is. And they beautifully, so grateful to them, they spent time with each of those 3 sacraments, just in twos or threes. We had the big, easel paper up on the wall. And they wrote down the things that this is what I expect to see. And I have tons and tons of things on each of the 3 sacraments, but 5 items came up in all 3. And that's what the task force focused on. Those 5, I hope I remember them all: Mass, prayer life, relationship with Jesus, help me, Bill.
Baptism.
Oh my gosh, baptism. Because the beautiful thing was that there was a recognition, lifelong process. That was the not to be on the assembly line. That that formation is a lifelong process.
Right.
Mass, lifelong process. Prayer, rituals. The rituals, actions, and words of the sacraments. That there is an that the child and the family can show that there's an understanding of what the actions are of this sacrament. And then baptism, and baptism's role in that it's the building block of grace, and all sacraments should be all that catechesis should be oriented towards our baptismal call, and the importance of understanding, even at a 7-year-old's appropriate level, the understanding the importance of your baptism and all of this. So we ended up getting many wonderful suggestions on how to engage families at baptism and stay engaged with them through to first sacraments. So I thought that was a beautiful. So yes, pastors were certainly involved, and we also have the privilege later in October at the priest convocation. We've been asked to give a presentation on everything that's going on. So
one of the ways that we know is sort of that this has been led by the Holy Spirit is that we talked to pastors about what their priorities were, and then the members of the task force also asked families, and they know families, right? So they sort of brought forward families' priorities, asked them what they were, and there was so much overlap between what parents want for their kids and what pastors want for the faithful, or what they feel like will help grow with a formation. And that, to me, I think was a real eye opener.
Such as?
Well, the beautiful thing in because again, we called the presentation Tuesday Spirit-led, because it absolutely has been. And in that case, which I think is so monumental about those 2 things, is that the families were asked, the task force identified a lot of different priorities, what we think is important to families. We wanted to make sure families affirm that. Are we hearing you correctly? And then also, what's the most important? Prioritize them for us, because we can't work on everything at once, right? So they came up with, they talked about rituals and traditions, they talked about relationship with Jesus, they talked about access to adapted resources and staff, because a number of our children have learning differences or physical challenges, and we need specialized staff and resources to address that. And also, for parishes to offer clear explanations and friendly, welcoming staff. So that was how the families had input in all this. Pastors were asked about readiness and those characteristics that I talked about before. So here you have 2 groups that were asked 2 very different questions, and that we ended up, and this again, Spirit-led, we discovered these similarities by accident. I have all these papers on my wall and the whiteboard, and I'm writing different things down. And I had the pastor stuff, the 5 things: Mass, lifelong process, prayer, relationship with Jesus, rituals, actions, and words, and baptism. I already had them up on the board. And I had one little spot that wasn't written in yet. And I was going through the family survey stuff that came back. So I started to pull out the top things, and I wrote them down. I was like, oh my gosh, they were next to each other. And then I saw there were similarities. They both want a relationship with Jesus for that child. They both want rituals, the understanding of rituals and traditions, and to value the reverence that goes around that. Right there off the bat, those 2 things. And then you could certainly look at others, how we can make connections to it. But the fact that we asked these groups, 2 very different groups, 2 very different questions, and we got similarities. Right. All right, Lord, we're on the right path. And this was all before we went to Chicago and heard about this new term, which isn't a new term, called evangelizing catechesis. And we're provided with a resource, a handbook on catechetical accompaniment, that essentially speaks to this. So my holy boldness when we came back was the bishops caught up to us. We were there first.
Oh, you love that,
Oh,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
The competitive nature.
Yeah, he's always
Exactly.
bragging about being the best diocese in the
That's right.
state. Now, look, we're past state lines.
Yeah, I know we're great.
Not a newsflash.
A little psychotic, but also great.
Yes. No, that was the thing that was the takeaway for Jen and I. We were, standing out in the back. Usually when we come to events like this and meetings like this, we got our arms folded. We're judging whatever the presenters are doing. And we kept... Yeah, don't even try it, Jen. You're back there.
Jen is shaking her head and mouthing like, I'm not doing that.
I'm not judging people.
Yeah, she wrates stuff. She writes me notes on her notepad.
I do.
Like,
Get a
can
load
you
of
believe
this
this psycho stuff? But the difference was we were genuinely having a conversation in the background, going, "Oh yeah, that's really sensible. Oh my God, I can't believe this is the first time somebody's thought about something like this."
Mm-hmm.
Now I have to assume that there's been a lot of great conversation today. There's probably going to be some difficulties going forward. Making a change like this, even one that's going to be, I think you're very wise to slowly roll it out and allow it to sort of mature organically. We can expect that, there'll be difficulties. People have a hard time understanding that, which will be, on the committee to sort of help with. But have you sort of thought, or have you been thinking already, like, what challenge you sort of face going forward with this?
I think one of the things that I'm committed to in facilitating all this is maintaining a healthy balance between honoring and respecting each parish's individual community and culture, but at the same time threading the needle with what are the set of standards that we're all going to agree upon and that will keep consistent throughout. So I think that's going to probably be one of the most interesting opportunities for us to tackle, and that to find that balance, because it will not work cookie cutter, right? It won't.
Right.
Yeah. If every parish does it, it's not going to work. Every parish community has different needs and they have a different identity, and we want to honor and respect that. At the same time, the church is the church.
Yeah.
So there's a set of things in there that we have to all universally, as a diocese, agree to, and as pastors, yes, support, because in case, for whatever reason, and there's a lot of valid reasons out there, that a family might have to seek their sacrament prep at another or formation for experience at another parish for whatever legitimate reason, but it shouldn't feel foreign, and they should be able to integrate into that. And unfortunately, what is happening now is, I think that is the case, where it's very different parish to parish. Families get frustrated. The people at the parish who are running the parishes are getting frustrated. And the whole point is to get people to encounter Christ, and all they're encountering is frustration. Yeah. So we want to definitely minimize that.
No, we're all just standing there looking at. Yeah, I'm just nodding my head because I think you hit something so important, which is every parish has its own identity.
Yep.
And it just wouldn't work unless you were allowed to embrace that.
Absolutely.
Would I be wrong to look at this as sort of like a Montessori school style of religious education? Would that be an inaccurate description?
I'll leave that to the superintendent.
I was trying to think of a clear way of articulating this, because I'll be honest. At your presentation, there may have been one or two times where I turned to Jen and went, I have no idea what they're talking about. So I was trying to come up with simple. Now, that's because you were rolling out something kind of brand new, and I hadn't heard any of this. So I was trying to get up to speed on it, which is one of the reasons we wanted to have you on the podcast, because I left there going, that's a great idea. I don't think I understand all the particulars. But I do understand what Montessori is, and that sort of moving at your own pace kind of thing. Would you say it's similar to that or dissimilar?
I kind of similar. I would say maybe informal would be, and I mean informal, like think of the example I would use, and it's coincidental that it's an agricultural one, is gardening, right? Okay. People who are gardeners love being in the garden, and they learn gardening by gardening, and they probably have a mentor in gardening. Maybe their mom, their dad, their brother, their friend, showed them how to do things, or maybe they went to the garden store and they asked questions. They probably also, at some point, picked up some formal knowledge about plants, whether that was in school or they sort of... So you have all of these different pieces kind of informing the garden. And so there are pieces that are formal, There are pieces that are informal. There are pieces that are self-led. There are pieces that are kind of required, probably, and so all of those things working together build to a point where you have readiness for the sacrament. And I would say, as we mature as Catholics and Christians in relationship with Christ, we have to continue on that. We're not like ready once. You have to be ready to receive Jesus in the Eucharist every week, every day if you want, and so just the habit of continuing to sort of till our own soil, so to speak, is one that we want to make sure that we're nurturing, right? So,
well, I got to tell you, I was very impressed with the presentation. I'm very impressed with this sort of new perspective that you're taking on this. I can't wait to see how things roll out
Me too.
in the upcoming there you go, in the upcoming months and years. But thank you very much for being on the podcast today. I can pretty much guarantee you'll be invited back in the future to give us an update at some point. And you guys have a great week. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you again next week. See you, everybody.